Chancellor, Dr. Thabo Mbeki, Principal and Vice Chancellor for our beloved university, Professor Pulen Lenkabula, family and friends of Professor Frederick Tabit, our inaugurant, Unisens, good afternoon. My name is Ramahwai Mahano and I am the Acting Vice Principal, Teaching, Learning, Community Engagement and Student Support. On behalf of the University Council and the Principal and Vice Chancellor, Professor Pulen Lenkabula, it is indeed with the greatest of pleasures that I welcome you all to this inaugural lecture, which is hosted online due to the restrictions imposed on our lives by the COVID-19 pandemic. We nonetheless want to appreciate the inaugurant, Professor Frederick Tabit, for attaining the pinnacle of academia, the professorate. Today we are delighted to have the opportunity to listen to the story of his academic journey to this end. Ladies and gentlemen, it is also important for me to recognize and appreciate the presence of colleagues from the College of Agriculture and Environmental Sciences and the broader university community. In particular, it is my honor to acknowledge and appreciate the presence of Professor Monden Dwasa, the Acting Executive Dean of the College of Agriculture and Environmental Sciences, who will introduce Professor Tabit. Once Professor Tabit has completed the lecture, Professor Elizabeth Kempen, a senior academic in the Department of Life and Consumer Sciences, will give a response. In addition, it is important that we also recognize and welcome Professor Tabit's family members, friends, and associates to this important lecture, who in one way or another may have contributed meaningfully towards his academic journey. Please know that you are heartily welcomed. One of the primary responsibilities of a university such as ours is to play a primary role in knowledge creation and advancement, which contributes meaningfully to the growth and enhancement of the country's economy. And to that end, we are reliant on the research prowess of the professorate. That is why we are so excited when a colleague, such as in the case of Professor Tabit, attains the rank of a full professor. Ladies and gentlemen, it is now my privilege to request Professor Monden Dwasa to introduce Professor Tabit.
Principal and Vice Chancellor, Professor Lenkabula, Professor S.R. Mahano, Acting Vice Principal, Teaching, Learning, Community Engagement, and Student Support, Professor Tabit, our inaugurant today, whom I'm going to introduce later, Professor Kempen, who will be respondent to Professor Tabit. Ladies and gentlemen, family and friends, good evening. I am pleased to introduce to you our inaugurant today, Professor Frederick Tabit. Professor Tabit completed a bachelor's degree in life sciences and specialized in microbiology at the University of Buea in Cameroon, and this was in 1997 to 2000. From 2003 to 2007, he completed a master's program in biofood technology, specializing in food technology at Lund University in Sweden. From 2007 to 2010, he completed a PhD in food science at the University of Pretoria in South Africa. In 2011, he was nominated the South African Society of Dairy Science and Technology Postgraduate Student of the Year, and it was based on the quality of his PhD in the field of dairy science. Towards the end of his PhD in 2009, he was employed as a food science lecturer at the Department of Life and Consumer Science at the University of South Africa. Since then, he has risen to the rank of a full professor in the department, and his research focus area is in food science and also in quality control, food microbiology, and food product development. He is involved in curriculum renewal and development within the department. He also serves as an external examiner for the University of Johannesburg, the Durban University of Technology, University of Mpumalanga, Northwest University, and Sefako Makgatho Health Sciences University. He is a reviewer expert for the Codex Committee on Food Hygiene of the Department of Health in South Africa. He has supervised 1 PhD and 18 master's students to completion. He is currently supervising 5 PhD and 9 masters. He has published over 25 articles in accredited journals and in 1 book chapter. He is also rated by NRF as a C2 rated researcher with a Scopus index of 8. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm happy to present to you our inaugurant today, Professor Frederick Tabit.
I am Professor Frederick Tabit from the University of South Africa. I'm here today to present my inaugural lecture titled Addressing Food Safety and Quality Challenges Through Food Science Research. And before I commence with this lecture, I want to acknowledge a few colleagues in the university and management in the university. I want to acknowledge Professor Puleng Lekabula, the Principal and Vice Chancellor of the University of South Africa. I want to acknowledge Professor Mwakano, the Vice Principal in charge of teaching, learning, community engagement, and student support. I want to also acknowledge Professor Ntwasa, the Acting Executive Dean of the College of Agriculture and Environmental Science. I want to also acknowledge my respondent, Professor Kempen at the Department of Life and Consumer Sciences. And also I want to acknowledge all those who've listening to this lecture and who are supporting me throughout the preparation of this lecture. So I'm going to commence with the lecture proper. And like I said, the title is Addressing Food Safety and Quality Challenges Through Food Science and Technology. The first thing that I'm going to present to you is my academic journey, which was not an easy one. My academic, in terms of getting qualification, started in 1989, where I obtained my first school living certificate. And in 1994, I obtained a secondary certificate, which is known as the GCE O-level certificate, and the GCE A-level certificate in 1997. As you may know, all of this happened in Cameroon, my country of origin. I got a Bachelor of Science in Life Sciences at the University of Buea in Cameroon in 2000, and a Master's in Bio and Food Technology in 2004 at Lund University in Sweden. So, and ultimately, I obtained my PhD at the famous University of Pretoria in 2009. Okay. My PhD experience, I just want to give a brief history on my experience at the University of Pretoria. I'll just focus on my first trip to the University of Pretoria when I arrived at Johannesburg and I need to make my way to Pretoria. Then I took the taxi. When I arrived at Pretoria, I was looking for the University of Pretoria. I was shocked that very few people at that time knew the University of Pretoria, but when I mentioned the word Turkish, so many people could assist me. Many of the taxi drivers, they could understand that Turkish was the University of Pretoria. So that was one thing that got me amused. And also when I was returning back to Johannesburg, I went to the taxi rank to get a taxi, and somebody suggested that I should enter the train. And I got into the metro rail train. I was well dressed with my vest and my tie. Then when I got into metro rail, I was shocked to see that everybody was just casual there. Then I felt like I was in another planet. Since then, I make sure I check my dressing code before I get into metro rail. Okay, at the University of Pretoria, my PhD supervisor was Prof, which I adored, which I admired over the years. And my MSc experience was also at Lund in Sweden, where I arrived in Europe for the first time in 2003, and I had to sleep in the bus station because I could not figure out how to use the train and the taxi to my destination. And I had to sleep in the cold for the first time in my life. That was also an experience of mine. Okay, I just want to acknowledge my good Lord Jesus Christ, and I'll make this quote: "When you shall eat of the fruit of your hands, you will be happy, and it will be well with you." So if you work hard, then you are going to achieve the fruits of your labor. So I'm encouraging everyone who is listening to me to know that the only thing that can give you success is hard working. I also want to acknowledge my mother, Teresa Oma Tabit, and my father, Peter Akwai Tabit, my siblings, Comfort, Maxwell, Athanasius, Elvis, Marcellus, Jude, and all the Tabits. Also my wife, Wendy Tabit, my children, Glenn, Dumisani, Salome, and all the Tabits. And other external family members, colleagues, and friends who have assisted me throughout my journey. Okay, my focus is food science research, and I do food microbiology, I do food processing, food technology. So these are all the disciplines that constitute food science for those who have been in any food science department or faculty. So regarding the microbial quality of food, my research that I did at my PhD when I was in the University of Pretoria was to look at Bacillus sporothermodurans. Okay, Bacillus sporothermodurans, as you may know, is a bacteria that can find its way into the UHT milk, the ultra high heat treated milk. So you can see that I studied this milk and found bacteria inside, to the amusement of many people. But I must say that Bacillus sporothermoduran is not a pathogenic bacteria. So people should not get concerned. So in actual fact, we found the bacteria in milk, and we tried to study the prevalence of this bacteria in milk. Okay, so this we found that the bacteria were prevalent in the UHT milk, and we did not isolate this bacteria in raw milk and fresh milk. So you can see that the niche area of this bacteria is UHT milk. Okay, so you can see the count we did. We also tried to monitor the survival of this bacteria in terms of temperature treatment. And what we found out is that the bacteria can survive high temperature. So if you can see on the table, we have temperature up to 120 degrees and temperature up to 140 degrees. So you can see that some of the bacteria almost survive all the temperature range at 120 degrees. So therefore, this is a bacteria that is prevailing under heat treatment conditions. So if you treat the milk, all the other bacteria would die, while this one will survive. So we concluded that there was a prevalence of this bacteria in South Africa. Okay, the next study that we did was to look at the growth characteristics of this bacteria, because we saw that this bacteria was existing in UHT milk. So we need to monitor how this bacteria grows. So we need to subject this bacteria to different growth conditions and try to see how the bacteria respond. Okay, so we positively identified this bacteria by extracting DNA. As you can see in the picture, those are DNA. We subject the DNA to PCR identification, specific PCR that will isolate certain segments of the Bacillus sporothermoduran. So the gel picture can show you how those DNA presented themselves when run into agarose gel electrophoresis. We also looked at different brands of UHT milk, and we monitor their existence. So this was another study, because in the previous study we did just a prevalence study, but this other study was to monitor brands over a period of time and to see whether we are going to isolate Bacillus sporothermodurans within the different seasons. So you can see spring, summer, autumn, winter. So these are the southern hemisphere seasons. So in terms of growth, this is what we found. You can see we have growth, those lines. We have the top one is growth, the middle one is sporulation, and then you have pH at the bottom. So what we found is that in terms of growth, Bacillus sporothermodurans is that type of bacteria that will grow very fast and then peak quickly. So you can see that after between 50 to 100 hours of incubation, bacteria or just around 50, the bacteria has already peaked, and just after 50, then there's a decline, and then you have the peaking of the bacteria, and the peaking takes place at a pH of 28. So you can see that Bacillus proteomodulans is not, the pH of the milk is not really that affected by the growth of Bacillus proteomodulans. Hence, the inability of people to be able to detect their presence, like it would be the case with other bacteria. Okay, so then we look at sporulation. You can also see that the sporulation is also not much, because you can see there's only a very slight increase in sporulation right up to when the bacteria has peaked. So this is a kind of bacteria that it does not grow in high density in UHT milk. Hence, it is difficult to pick up that this milk or that one or another one is contaminated by Bacillus proteomodulans. Okay, so the conclusion of the study is that Bacillus proteomodulans can grow up to a maximum concentration of 1.9 exponent 5 colony forming unit per mil, but the proteolytic activities and also the pH was not significantly influenced. So hence I said the milk can look good. So you can't really detect it by tasting or by trying to perceive the odor that is coming out from it. Okay, the next work that we did was to look at, because when we identify a problem, we try to solve it. So the next work that we did was to look at how we can inactivate Bacillus proteomodulans and to monitor how the mechanism of destruction of the spores. So hence we studied that by subjecting the spores to different heat treatments. So as you can see in the pictures, you can see that the destruction of Bacillus proteomodulans started internally, okay? But in this slide, I just want to demonstrate the structure of Bacillus proteomodulans. So you can see, like many other spores, it houses the outer layers and the inner layers. So, and you have the spore coat somewhere in the middle. So all these layers are there to protect the bacteria. But we managed to subject this bacteria to high temperature, and you can see that the mechanism of the spores were not seriously damaged, hence the ability of this bacteria to survive heat treatment. So we'll see in the next slide. So you can see how certain portions of the bacteria were ripped apart, where I've marked X in the diagram. So you can see those are sections that were starting to be damaged or were damaged during heat treatment. And we also measure all some of the chemical components, one of which was dipicolinic acid. So this is an internal component of a spore. So we monitor the leakage of dipicolinic acid as a probe to understand the amount of damage that is taking place inside the spore. So this is another picture to show you how the damage is taking place inside the spore. Okay, so the conclusion we arrive at this study is that the onset of dipicolinic acid release during wet heat treatment coincide with visible sign of structural damage. So in actual fact, structural damage is taking place and dipicolinic acid is leaking out from the cell. So, and the amount of inactivation also coincide with increase in the release of dipicolinic acid. So in actual fact, we can damage the spores of this bacteria, but at the level, at the temperature at which we process milk, the UHT milk, this bacteria can actually survive that temperature. So you need a higher temperature and probably a longer time to be able to achieve destruction. So eventually this bacteria is susceptible to heat treatment, but at a higher temperature and or time. Okay, now I'm going to talk about microbial safety of food. So this is another segment of research that I do in terms of microbial safety. So in this study, we look at the microbial quality of ready-to-eat street vended food sold in the Johannesburg municipality. And what we found is that what is found is that most of the vegetable were contaminated by a broad range of bacteria, some of which are associated to sewage pollution, some of which are associated to contaminated irrigation water, and all those bacteria that are associated with vegetable environment, you know. So it should be noted that when we talk about vegetable, there are two types of vegetable. The vegetable that are prepared minimally or consumed as it is without cooking, and those that are being cooked. So this study was just to look at the overall hygiene level, or the environment, the level of hygiene that is being practiced according to set standard. So in this same study, we also looked at pathogens, and we detected some few pathogens, but the amount of pathogens in the vegetables were not alarming. So there was actually no major cause for concern in terms of the incidence of pathogen, you see. So based on the finding of the study, the microbial quality and safety of ready-to-eat street vended food sold in the Johannesburg metropolis remain a serious public concern, because high loads of bacteria entails that the hygienic environment is not good, so it's not up to standard. So it is necessary to educate the street vended food, the street food vendors on hygienic practice. So this is something that the municipality, the health services of the municipality must take note. But indeed, we did send a copy of all our food safety papers to them. So they've taken note of it, and surely they are working on it. Okay. All right, so this is another study that we also look at the hygiene status and incidence of foodborne pathogen on food contact surfaces. Okay. So we also studied food contact surfaces. I think this one was in NSMP, the National School Nutrition Program. So we went to their kitchens, and we do an assessment of the hygiene status and the incidence of foodborne pathogens on their food contact surfaces. It could be the bench top, the handle of the refrigerator, and many other things. Okay. So we also found that hygiene was a problem, because a high level of bacteria, of total plate count, okay, we call it the aerobic plate count, just the amount of bacteria that can be found on the surfaces, is an indication of the hygienic practice in that environment. So we found that many of the surfaces had high loads of bacteria counts, and that maybe the workers should do more or to disinfect and clean the surfaces. So there's a need to pay attention to sanitization in those kitchens. And so the majority of food contact surfaces had unsatisfactory hygiene status. So I've already mentioned that. So therefore, food safety programs, especially in terms of cleaning or in terms of hygiene, should be instituted in some of those facilities. So again, the finding of this study was presented to, I think, the National Department of Education, Basic Education, I think the Mpumalanga branch, because this study was done in Mpumalanga, I think. Okay. Now this is another study that we did with my colleague, Dr. Bekisisa Dlamini at the University of Johannesburg. We looked at the prevalence, molecular identification, and antimicrobial resistance of Listeria species isolated from ready-to-eat food sold in Johannesburg. As we may know that, I just want to make the distinction that Listeria monocystogenes is the pathogenic species, while Listeria innocua is not pathogenic. But since it's very dangerous to work with Listeria monocystogenes, most of the time when we want to simulate Listeria monocystogenes, we use Listeria innocua. So in this study, we try to simulate the presence of Listeria innocua in selected food. And then we'll see in the table below. So you can see we did tomato salad, yogurt, coleslaw, we did liver spread, yogurt, and many other foodstuffs that were purchased. We purchased them from the the supermarket and also street food vendors in Johannesburg. So we monitor these products for the presence of Listeria innocua. Okay, so and then you can see that we had a good count of Listeria innocua, and then the next thing that we did is to subject this Listeria innocua to selected disinfectants. So you can see we didn't put the names there: BX, SG, PF, SC. So those are acronyms that we use since we could not use the actual names for commercial reasons or advertisement reasons. All right, so we found out that many of these Listeria innocua were resistant to some of these disinfectants. As you may know, that some of these commercial disinfectants, they do have a certain concentration that is the recommended concentration by the manufacturer. So what we actually do is to take the recommended concentration, dilute it downward and concentrate it upward, and try to see if Listeria monocystogenes is going to succumb to the recommended concentration of the manufacturer. So, but eventually we found out that some of the Listeria innocua were resistant or could only die at a higher concentration other than the one indicated by the manufacturer. So this is a problem because, I mean, if we are simulating Listeria monocystogenes, it means that there's a risk that if we have a Listeria monocystogenes contamination in our food product, then it can be very serious. I mean, it can spread further because if they are not being killed by the various type of chemical agents that are used as sanitizers in South Africa. So that's basically what this study was all about. So there was a cause of concern. So we see that the overall prevalence of Listeria innocua was considerable. So I mean, there was relatively high levels of Listeria innocua contamination, and because some of them are resistant to antibacterial agents, so it's really a cause of concern. Just imagine if we have outbreak of Listeria monocystogenes, and then that outbreak can be sustained for a long period of time. Okay, now the next segment of the research I do is food safety awareness. This one is about food handlers, okay, and their awareness about food safety protocols. All right, so the first study we did, we studied the food safety knowledge and microbial hazard awareness of consumers of ready-to-eat street vended food. This study was conducted in Johannesburg, okay, and we found that most of the street food vendors lack important food safety knowledge, okay, and the most important knowledge that they lacked was knowledge on temperature, because you know we have cooking temperatures, we have storage temperatures, we have serving temperatures. So we realized that most of the street food vendors do not have sufficient food safety knowledge. Hence, we recommended training. As the finding of this study was also given to the Johannesburg municipality, so that they can see what they can do in helping the street food vendors. Because I know that food safety training is very expensive. For those who have attended one, they know what I'm talking about. Okay, then the other one is an assessment of the food safety knowledge and attitude of food handlers in hospital. Okay, this study was conducted in all the government hospital in Mpumalanga, I think. Yes, in Mpumalanga. And we also found a similar pattern that most of the food handlers, they lack knowledge on temperature control, you know. So all the temperature criteria for handling, cooking, and serving food. So, and some of the facilities also were not up to standard. So, I mean, we made our recommendations to the hospital management, because we always get permission from them to do the studies anyway. So that is part of the condition, that if you do the study, you must provide us with the finding first before you even publish your papers. So, but we don't mention names of the hospital, so everyone can live with that. So we also found out that the level of education, the employment position, experience in food handling, food safety training all these aspects do not really have much to do with the amount of knowledge that the food handlers have. But you can find out that there are certain aspects that require some level of education and the position of employment, like knowledge on foodborne bacteria, like knowledge on knowledge on foodborne bacteria. So the more educated they are, the more knowledgeable they were. So that's one of the things that we found in that hospital. So sometimes if you want to recruit food handlers in the hospital, then you must maybe consider those with higher qualification. Then it's easy to train them, but I don't know. But that's something that other people can investigate. Food safety awareness continues. So this one is the food safety knowledge of street food vendors and the sanitary conditions of their street food vending environment. So this one is in the Zululand district. Okay. And in this study is basically the same thing like the previous one, but the addition here was looking at the sanitary facilities of street food vendors. And I must say that the street food vendors are not having the best of facilities. I think that's something that the government can look into, how to help them, because these people are providing food to the society anyway. So I'm not going to go to the details. It's just a similar pattern in terms of the knowledge and the sanitary environment. Okay. The next one is also a similar study, sanitary compliance of street food vending facilities and as well as the knowledge. And this one was done in Johannesburg. And you could see that there was not much of a difference between the knowledge of street food vendors in Johannesburg and those in the Zululand. So wherever you are, it's the same group of people. They have limited knowledge in almost the same aspects. And their street food vending facilities are not up to standard. And we do have some of the sanitary standards in the country. So I think that is another aspect that the government must look at, because it's like somebody is just putting a blind eye on them and not trying to help them, so that they should meet the standards that are there in conventional food service outlets, like the restaurants and so on. Okay, so now the final segment of my research is food product development. Okay, I also do a little bit of food processing and food product development. Okay, because I used to wonder why we are living in Africa and all the processed food are so expensive and only eaten by few, but we have all the raw materials here. So I think lack of research and lack of industrialization is a problem. So we have to start to see the kinds of product that we can develop from our indigenous crops. So I did the study on Colocasia esculenta, okay, which is also known as amadumbe in South Africa, and is known as taro as well, okay. So what we actually did here is to try to see how we can use flour made from the amadumbe and the flour made from soybeans and come up with a kind of a biscuit, okay. So this is the amadumbe plant, for those who don't know. So it produces a corm, and the corm is the one that is starchy and is the part that we use to make the flour. Okay, so we produce our biscuit, and we did approximate composition analysis, and we found out that our biscuit has most of the nutrients, if I can say, that are available in conventional biscuits. And on top of that, it is gluten-free. So, I mean, this is something that we need to try to see how it can be commercialized. But unfortunately, at the level of the university, we just do this research and keep them. And I think, yeah, so these are ideas that entrepreneurs can look at and see what they can do, because these papers are published in open access journals. So it's available for anyone to tap into. Okay, so you can even see here that we also did the amino acid analysis of the biscuit, and we could see that it's rich in all the amino acids that are necessary for growth. So both the essential and non-essential amino acids. So even the minerals. So amadumbe biscuit can be good, especially for those who are having gluten problems. Okay. So now, research aside, we also I also engage in community engagement, okay, with my colleagues and my students. So the community engagement that we are busy with is to try to see how we can train people in the community with relevant food safety knowledge and food processing skills. So, and we've targeted Diepsloot and Alexandra, okay? Yeah, Diepsloot and Alexandra. So we'll be working in Diepsloot and Alexandra. So we are going to identify street food vendors, those people who process food in the small scale and sell them to the public, and see how we can help them. So that is the new project that we've embarked in 2022. It was supposed to have started in 2020, but because of the COVID outbreak, so we could not start that project. Okay, thank you very much, and thank everyone for coming and for listening. Thank you very much. God bless you all.
Prof. Mohano, Acting Vice Principal, Teaching, Learning, Community Engagement and Student Support. Prof. Ntwaza, Acting Executive Dean, College of Agriculture and Environmental Sciences, colleagues and guests. It is my privilege to provide a brief response to the inaugural lecture presented by Prof. Tabit. The pillars of microbial quality and food safety, grounding his research, not only addresses current and continuous concerns raised by the World Health Organization, they also provide a scientific response to addressing microbial issues in food product processing and preparation. The World Health Organization's concern with the global state of unsafe food puts into perspective the importance of the research Prof. Tabit conducts, as it is estimated that 1 in 10 people worldwide fall ill after consuming contaminated food. Unsafe food is known to contain harmful bacteria, viruses, parasites, or chemical substances that can lead to more than 200 diseases ranging from diarrhea to cancer. It is well understood that food safety, nutrition, and food security are interlinked, as unsafe food results in disease and malnutrition a developing country can ill afford, as the socio-economic impact of foodborne diseases strains healthcare systems, economies, tourism, and trade. Coming from the COVID-19 pandemic, we know this all too well, again emphasizing the importance of food safety research. With this in mind, it is especially the research related to the microbial content of street food, the knowledge of street food vendors in relation to food safety practices, and the knowledge of consumers purchasing ready-to-eat meals that suggests the urgency with which food safety in South Africa should be addressed. Within the South African context as a developing country, the importance of street food vendors have never been more significant. These enterprises not only provide job opportunities to many jobless citizens of South Africa, but provide substance at an affordable price to many South African consumers and hard-working individuals. A poor understanding of the importance of food safety within the food vendor context may not only result in many informal businesses closing down, but will deny many South African consumers a very important meal opportunity. Therefore, the continuation of safe food vending informal businesses are critical to address the ever-important United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, or otherwise known as the SDGs. As UNISA is focusing attention on the Sustainable Development Goals and how the research emanating from this institution is addressing the SDGs, Prof. Tabit's research is in fact addressing several of these goals. I'm specifically referring to the continuation of safe food vending, through which SDG 1 relating to no poverty can be addressed, which also speaks to SDG 8 specifically related to decent work and economic growth. The continuation of safe vending practices will definitely impact these SDGs. Furthermore, through the continuation of safe street food vending, SDG 2 that relates to zero hunger and SDG 3 capturing the health and well-being of those consuming street food is of utmost importance, to which this research further contributes. Reflecting on the role of the Sustainable Development Goals in South Africa, the importance of the contribution of this research cannot be emphasized more, as there are many dependents who may be negatively affected if this research goes unnoticed by UNISA or ignored in South Africa. More specific, the laboratory analysis of microbial organisms in street food executed in the papers that were published by Prof. Tabit makes a critical contribution to a better understanding of the circumstances related to street food vending. As a result, there is still a lot to be done, as further food safety research can save the lives of those who operate in informal businesses, service learners and the sick, and those who consume food from these services. Each of these services are dependent on safe food preparation and delivery, making food safety one of the crucial elements to be considered in any food-related establishment, whether informal or formal. Furthermore, in his research, Prof. Tabit points to the need for further education in order to improve the knowledge and practices of street food vendors, consumers of these products, and food handlers operating in schools and hospital environments where food safety is paramount. In a review on food safety and hygiene, published by Kamjo and authors in 2020, they argue that the biggest challenge in the food industry is to motivate food handlers to apply what they have learned regarding food safety and food hygiene. It is therefore even more important that informal traders and food handlers who are not part of the food industry at least receive training of principles generally known in the food industry, in the hope that these principles will be applied to improved food safety. Through knowledge, safer business practices are envisaged, supported by a more knowledgeable consumer who is able to distinguish between safe and unsafe food. Therefore, the impact of the community engagement project Prof. Tabit has developed is critical if both the concern of the World Health Organization in relation to food safety and the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals are to be addressed. There has never been a better time to support this engagement project, as COVID-19 has brought about many job losses and many opportunities for street food vending in South Africa, as this is yet another survivalist business significant of emerging economies. Through this project, UNISA's impact can be far-reaching and significant in many ways, bringing about a difference to the lives of many South Africans touched by small street food vending operations. The impact of the research Prof. Tabit has published in journals, such as the Journal of Food Control with an impact factor of 5.48, and BMC or Biomed Central Public Health Journal with the impact factor of 3.17, signifies the global contribution his research is making by raising awareness to everyday situations in developing countries. By highlighting the South African perspective, more attention can be focused on the South African and African context, situation, and existence, bringing about a better understanding of the differences consumers and the food vendors face in developing countries to that of developed countries. This research makes a valuable contribution to highlight the context of South African consumers and users and the importance of food safety within small vending businesses and where general food handling is concerned. Not only does the research Prof. Tabit engages in compete at a scientific level, but it is able to address practical everyday problems which are part of the context of a developing country. In concluding, as food scientists, through food science-related research, Prof. Tabit has highlighted the importance of addressing food safety concerns in relation to what we know as normal, everyday products and situations in South Africa. Subsequently, his research is raising an awareness and cautioning local municipalities to provide the necessary educational resources that will empower street food vendors and food handlers in general, as these role players are critical in managing food safety in South Africa. I end with the slogan proposed by the World Health Organization for the World Food Safety Day to be held on the 7th of June 2022. It reads, "Safe food, better health," which the World Health Organization claims will draw attention and mobilize action to prevent, detect, and manage foodborne risks and improve human health. The importance of food safety research is here and now. Perhaps the college should also celebrate not only World Food Day, but World Food Safety Day to assist in creating a better awareness and importance of food safety. The meaningful research Prof. Tabit and his fellow scholars are conducting will continue to shed light on very relevant and current microbial areas of concern that, if gone unnoticed, may have a detrimental effect on consumers, food handlers, and vendors in South Africa. I thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, as we come to the end of the proceedings, it is proper that we express our gratitude and congratulations to Professor Frederick Tabit for a well-presented inaugural lecture. I personally found it to be informative and insightful in many respects. On behalf of the University Council and Senate, we welcome you, Professor Tabit, to the rank of the professorate and implore you to make meaningful use of the recognition and the privileges attached thereto. It is a reasonable expectation from us to expect more and more research publications and more master and doctoral candidates being completed through your supervision. Ladies and gentlemen, as we taper to the end of the proceedings, may I request you to join me as we congratulate Professor Tabit by writing congratulatory messages on the chat platform. I thank you.